Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Orchard. I'm the head of marketing here at ARC. I am thrilled to be here today with Lynn Collette. So she is the design director at Automattic. And today we're going to chat about how to get a remote design job at Automattic. So there will be a Q&A session that's going to happen during the last about 15 minutes of this talk. So remember, but you can ask your questions throughout the entire talk in the stage chat. So any questions you have, I will sort through those at the end and we'll get to as many as we can. So really excited to have Lynn here. So let's jump in. Okay, so instead of me introducing Lynn, I'm going to start this off like a typical, job seeker would experience. So let's start with a familiar job kind of interview question. Can you tell me about yourself, Lynn? How would you answer that? And what is your sort of elevator pitch to people?
Well, my name is Lynn Collette, and I've spent the last 20 years working across design and engineering teams, kind of a hybrid designer-developer at companies like Apple, Uber, and now I'm at Automattic. I've been at Automattic for just over a year and a half. I joined as a creative technologist, and now I lead a team of designers. I have 2 designers and 1 front-end developer on WordPress.com.
Awesome. Why did you decide to pursue remote design as your career, this specific area?
There's actually a couple of reasons. This is my first remote design job, though at my previous companies, I've had the opportunity to work from home. And whenever I did that, I found myself more productive and I enjoyed work more. Being able to set my own environment is really a huge driver in pursuing that remote career. I found it difficult to focus at the office, in that open environment. Being able to control sound, noise, visual noise, that was really important. So those things are just very distracting for me. Often at the office, I'd go and hide somewhere and I could just do that in the comfort of my own home. The other reason is I wanted to avoid commuting wherever possible. When I worked at Apple, my commute was anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day. And that's a really long time to spend in a car or was a bus. You can do a lot more things with that time. And when I had a family, I'd rather spend that time with my family than, driving.
Absolutely. Were you always in the design area for your career, or was that something that developed over time?
Originally, I started off in design, and then I built a website, and that kind of changed my life. Being able to make something that I could manipulate and not just look at, it pushed me into developing, and so I self-taught. I learned how to build websites. My very first job was a PHP developer at the University of Toronto, and I was all self-taught, and yes, this is it. But over the course of my career, I missed the design aspect. I missed the creativity. There was some aspect of creative thinking when I was building websites, but not the design part. And so I wanted to be a part of that. So a few years ago, I looked at my skill set. What can I do with this? I don't want to do development. I don't want to be an engineer. What about interaction design? And then I found prototyping. And I had a job at Smart Design just building prototypes. I was this is really cool.
What kind of prototypes were you building? Were they physical products?
So the best project that I did there was actually a car buck. So we designed an interface for a car dashboard, and we had to do user testing. So we had Arduino and real pedals, real steering wheel. And I created the interface so that we could test to see whether that the design that we created, we had 2 different concepts, would work. It was actually pretty lifelike.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that the prototyping, was that something that was also self-taught, or you just discovered it on your own and kind of?
Yeah. I was working in a small studio called Particle, and half of us did iAds, worked on iAds, and the other us, we built these concepts, these proof of concepts. This was a while ago, so we were taking what was traditionally Flash and building that in, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that was really my introduction to this proof of concept prototype career path.
Mm-hmm. Someone is saying, this was not something like you did in Figma. This was like, in this case, it was like a real
prototype. Yeah. So it's
like, I'm guessing you may have touched on digital prototyping as well later on in your career.
When you say digital prototyping, I mean, all my prototypes are code-based. So
okay, there you go. Not physical products. Yes, code-based.
Yeah, it was a combination of both.
That's really interesting. So, you found design, but you didn't sort of expect that that's where your career would take you. So how did you end up landing at your current job, with Automattic? And could you just walk us through with so how you found it and what that process was like, whether it was an application or how that happened?
Yeah, for sure. So I had taken a few months off. I think I took about 6 months off and just, I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. And while I was doing that, a job was posted on Twitter for a creative technologist at Automattic. Like, oh, this is interesting. So I looked at the description and it matched everything that I like to do. Exactly. I'm like, okay, I need to apply to this. This is it. The application process was split across a few phases. The first was your cover letter, and I sent in a PDF of case studies.
Did they ask for that, or was that something you added on?
Yeah, you had to include a portfolio, and so my portfolio is some case studies. And then, describing why I wanted to work at Automattic. And then from there was a Slack chat. It was about an hour long. And that was really to gauge communication skills, to make sure you're able to have a conversation. And, just basic, tell me about yourself. What's your path? How did you find us? What do you like about working here? And then after that, I was invited to participate in a trial project. And so everyone who applies at Automattic has a trial project to work through. They could be anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks long. Sometimes they might be less if you're really great, or they might be longer. Depends, but generally 3 to 6 weeks. And those take place entirely on our P2 platform, which is our internal blog system. So we use that to track all of our projects. It starts with your design brief, where you're given a problem to solve, and then you have a team of folks you can get help from to, they're really evaluating you as you go through your design process, but it's just as you would do with a normal project. And of course it is paid.
Yeah. So was that a nerve-wracking experience to do the trial project? Because you're being evaluated and you kind of know every step of the way, what did that feel like?
Yes, it was nerve-wracking because I didn't know what to expect. I'd never done something like this before. And, since they're judging on your communication and you're not having those one-to-one conversations, it's all text-based. So you want to make sure that you're getting everything and you're answering questions ahead of time, and, just the nerves of that. But everyone is so helpful and supportive. Anytime there is a question, there's someone to answer, whether it's in Slack, so you do have your own Slack channel, or on P2. And the responses are generally pretty fast.
Okay.
So you don't have to spin for too long.
You have teammates around the world. So when you were doing that, were you working, asynchronously, or were you did you have a lot of communication that was happening right at the same time?
It was all asynchronously, yes.
Okay. It's even harder to that, right?
Yeah, it's 12 to 24 hours usually between getting any responses. Yeah. But it's something that you adapt to,
right.
And you make use of the time that you have.
It's a good chance for you to see if that worked for you.
Exactly.
And working. It works. That's great. I wanted to ask you one question. So during that process, you mentioned, the cover letter. We hear, from different people how important the cover letter is in the remote space. Do you feel do you remember, I don't know if you remember what you wrote in your cover letter back then, but did you feel like you spent a lot of time to kind of perfect the perfect cover letter for Automattic, or any thoughts on that?
If I recall correctly, it was generally around framing my work toward the job description. So matching it more like a one-to-one and making sure that I was hitting those boxes. Yeah, that was my approach to it.
Okay. That's a pretty standard thing for all of you job seekers out there. You know, they say to personalize the cover letter, and really the best advice that I've heard and what Lynn is saying is look at the job description and see how your experience can match that and really speak to that and show that you're the right fit for the role. So it's not like you need to write some, you know, poetry for a cover letter. No, you just you need to write something that shows them you're a good fit. So
yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So, okay. So before you had the test project, do you remember anything about the interview questions they asked you? Like, how did you, you know, how did they assess you when they were first kind of getting to know you? If you can think of any of the interview questions, we'd love to share those with our listeners.
Yeah. The very first question they asked was, describe your journey as a designer. And that question was like, okay, well, I don't have your normal journey to a designer. And so that was a little bit, I hope this is okay. And turns out I was the first creative technologist that they were hiring. So they were also along the same, they were thinking the same thing. Like, is this person, are we asking the right questions of them? Let's see. Yeah, apart from that, they were all pretty, you know, your regular questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite interview question that you like? I mean, it could be from any job in your whole career, like any interview question that you think listeners might want to prepare for, something that you think is a good thing to have ready in your arsenal when you're doing interviews.
Yeah. My personal favorite interview question is to have someone walk me through one of their favorite projects, because you can learn a lot about a person just through what they bring up in that context, like their design process, what choices they make, whether they talk through the challenges, like all of that good stuff. It really gives insight into how they think through a problem and how deeply they think about it.
Yeah, I think if you've ever had an interviewer, I mean, interviewers have different levels that they'll get involved, but I think sometimes they ask you a question and it's up to you to really just give them the whole story, you know, from before, how you planned, what you did, the results, all of those things. So that's a good answer when you can fully answer that and tell a great story.
Yeah, I love hearing the challenges that have come up and how that person worked through that and what insights they got from it and what kind of changes they had to make.
I think sometimes perfectionists out there, I'll have to say I'm sometimes a perfectionist. You think that maybe, you know, you don't want to bring up the challenges because it seems like you didn't know what you're doing, but everyone faces challenges. That's where the interesting stuff is, right? How did you? And yeah, exactly. Because you're going to face challenges in your career, I'm sure. For those of you who are at the beginning of your career, like, yes, that's pretty much problem solving and challenge, you know, facing those head on. We're having some questions come in, but and we will answer those towards the end. So just want to let you know we're having some good questions. So thank you for those, everyone who's asking those in the chat. Okay, so we're still talking a little bit about your job at Automattic. And so I want to know, if you look back on kind of your experience, you said it's not really the traditional route that a designer would take. Do you think there's something unique that helped you land this job? Do you think it was maybe the unique experience you had and we weren't sort of the cookie cutter designer? Or is there anything that you look back on and say, you know, I can really see the thread through things? Obviously, hindsight is 20/20, but yeah, back, is there anything that stands out for you?
Yes, actually. Something that was unique for me is that I had that experience working across design and development. So I could speak both of those languages and be a bridge in between those. When I worked at Uber, that was a main part of my job, is like communicating the design vision with the development execution and figuring out like what we would have to cut, where we could make adjustments. And that was key. I'd say being curious, open-minded, self-motivated is what got me promoted to leadership a few months later at Automattic. We really appreciate that entrepreneurial kind of spirit. And as a company, we tend to self-organize around projects. So being able to recognize a need and drive a solution forward to fit that need is really awesome.
Yeah, so you're saying kind of curiosity is sort of one thing that got you promoted. How do you think that played out? Like you said, were you just volunteering for projects that would come up, or like what did that actually look like? Like you can say, "Oh, I'm a curious person," but
yeah,
how do you show that to your boss, your manager?
Yeah, I asked a lot of questions, like a lot of hard questions. Things that I was noticing, like, oh, well, we didn't have a design system, for example. I'm like, well, why don't we do this? It would be more efficient if we maybe tried to do that. So like recognizing stuff like that, and getting noticed by the right people, asking questions of them. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, it sounds a little bit personal, like you have to know who's the person to work with, as well as asking the right questions. I think that's
yeah. And when you ask the right questions, people notice too.
Did you find that you were also like proposing solutions? Like I heard you say, oh, hey, we could do this better. Did you then show them, okay, this might be the way that we could do it better?
Yeah. A couple months after I started, after pointing out a lot of things, I'm like, well, why don't you audit our UX? Okay, I'm going to lead that project. And that was kind of my stepping stone into leadership from that project.
That's awesome. Especially if anyone's joining a new organization, I think you start to notice things like, oh, this could be better. And they'll see those as opportunities of things that you can step in. And you're the set of fresh eyes who's coming into an organization that could be a space to grow and show your value there.
Yeah, fresh eyes, fresh perspective is so important.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can feel like, you've been with Automattic for 1.5 years, is that correct?
Yeah, just over that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're working with colleagues who've maybe been there for years. And so, they have the advantage in terms of knowing the company.
Context.
And, context for everything. But then you have those fresh eyes that might be able to see things other people haven't. So,
yeah.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about remote work and neurodiversity. Okay, so this is a topic that people like. I feel like it doesn't get talked about that much, but when I talk about it, I've talked about it in the past, people are quite interested in this. And so you mentioned at the beginning of our chat that, being in an office was kind of like, you wanted to like kind of crawl into a hole and escape that environment. So you said, obviously remote work improves the way you work personally. And you shared with me that you're someone that has ADD. So how has your daily life changed because you're working remotely in respect to that?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to have the opportunity to work remotely. What's really important for me is being able to work for a certain amount of hours and then take a break and do whatever I want, and then come back and work for some amount of hours. And then, the flexibility of my schedule is really important because of how my mind works. Like I can hyper focus on something for a short amount of time, and then I need to step away and let things percolate and then come back to it. Whereas at an office, you can't really do that. You can to a degree, but being able to step away and like play my Switch for a while, like do something that is very specific to my needs. You can't really do that at an office.
I mean, it's interesting too with design because this is knowledge work. We're not asking someone to sit and just, produce something. I mean, you need inspiration, you need fresh ideas. So I think especially for design, it sounds like something that works. I mean, for other careers too. I'm a remote worker and I'm in marketing. There's a lot of creativity that goes into that as well. Yeah. Is there anything that you feel like, is there any kind of downside that you miss about the office? Just curious.
Yes, definitely.
You like, any positive side that you kind of are nostalgic for?
Yes. Those, hey, do you have a second moments that you can just pull in another designer or an engineer, anyone to just, talk about an idea on your screen. Those things don't really happen. You have to be very intentional about having those moments, or you have to like schedule couch time or impromptu work sessions. They just, those moments of inspiration or being able to walk by a whiteboard full of ideas, those don't exist here. And I miss that.
I think that when it comes to sort of leadership and sort of remote work as a huge topic, I think we're working on those things. Like, how do you solve those kind of interactions that you can't replace I think there are ways, there are tools, you know, out there, like, you know, virtual whiteboarding. I think people are trying things. So I'm excited in this space to see what can happen. Because I agree with you. It's really nice to kind of see a whiteboard and jump into a conversation. You might not be able to. You really can't as easily in a remote space.
Yeah, it takes a lot of attention, and you have to decide, okay, I'm working on a problem. I'm just going to post in Slack. Does anyone have some free time? And, you know, add a Zoom link and hope people join you to discuss it. And that's actually worked for us a few times now.
Oh, really? So someone might just say, hey, I have this thing. Who wants to comment on it or give me some ideas? Okay.
Yeah. Or someone posts, I have this for feedback, and then like, oh, well, why don't we hop on a call and discuss it? And then more people join, and then you have an impromptu work session, and that's very energizing.
Something that we do in our team, we have an ideas channel, which is really meant to just say any half-baked idea that, like, it could be just like, hey, what if we start a community around this? And someone will be like, oh, why do you want to do that? So we try to create a space for that. Of course, it doesn't work as well, but I think experiment and see if you can find something that is close, or at least has some similarity to those kind of spontaneous moments.
Yeah, experimenting is also really, really important. Just generally in life, like trying new things and seeing what works. Sometimes it won't, but
whether it's your career or your work, processes,
exactly.
Do you have recommendations for those people out there who might be listening? Any neurodiverse professionals who are aspiring to work remotely? Maybe they're still stuck in the office right now. And do you tell this to your employers, like that this is, any of these kind of things about you personally, and how would you approach that conversation if you do?
Yes. So I was diagnosed last year. So Automattic is my first role with this knowledge. And, when I learned this, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. And so I found that being upfront about it and letting my manager know specifically what are the things that I need to be successful, it made more sense to inform than to not inform. And it went well. The specific type of leadership that works best for me is, appreciative leadership and, positive reinforcements, as opposed to more, this is wrong, do what I say. So letting my manager know that is how I can be successful was helpful in getting me up to speed at the company.
That's really interesting. Did you do that in like a face-to-face, I'd say video to video format, or did you write down kind of what you needed? I'm just curious how that conversation looked.
So when I first joined, one of the things that we do at Automattic is we have the operator's manual. So that's what's called. I think Lara Hogan has a good template for that. So we went through that, and as part of it, it just came up naturally because, some of the questions are, what are you looking for out of a manager? Or what do you need to be successful? How do we know when you're grumpy?
That's really, I've heard some similar things, like a personal README that you send to your manager.
Yeah, exactly.
And that I think we can provide some links to those in our Facebook community as well. Those are things that I'm a team leader in ARC, and that's something that we've experimented with, but we've done it face to face. Like, how do you want to be given feedback? But I think writing it down is actually probably better because people may be more honest. If you have time to reflect and be like, how do I actually like to be managed? Like, one-on-one to bring that up, but like, I think it's good for you to know too, to write it down and say, and things might change over time. Who knows? You can kind of update your operating manual,
Yeah, I had one designer who she was an introvert, and the next time she read through her owner's manual, or her operator's manual, she had become an extrovert or embraced that part of her. I'm like, oh, that's a big change.
Yeah, and people are multidimensional, and they're always growing. So someone who might have thought they were an introvert, maybe they were like a 60% introvert, and then they 60% extrovert. That's quite
the right environment can do that.
So you said Laura Hogan is the kind of reference. So I will try to link that one. I think that Steph Smith, she's going to be one of our speakers tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
She's also written about the README, or sort of that type of write down for your manager what you want them to know about you. So I think we can share those references. Those are great. Okay, so I want to get a few hot takes from you. So these are shorter answers. Well, you can talk for as long as you'd like. But I want to know for the, for designers out there or aspiring designers, what are 3 soft skills that you think can really be helpful in landing a remote design job?
Okay, communication, self-motivation, and problem solving. Communication is probably the highest one. Because with text-based communication, things can go wrong more easily. When you don't have body language to read, and you don't know the person, it's easy to read into things or read things in a way that they didn't intend. And, you can say assume positive intent, but that has its own issues. So being able to communicate clearly and understand that who you're communicating with, their different styles, and adapting to that it's important. With motivation, when you're working remote, you are, you're motivating yourself. It's easier at the office to just get in and then you're in work mode. But when you're at your house, you have to set those constraints and know what you need to do to stay on track and to stay focused on the solution or the end game. And then with problem solving, given the dynamic nature of working across time zones, sometimes you just have to figure things out or figure out a path forward while you're waiting for someone else to get back to you.
Yeah. I think that can be hard for maybe, say, junior team members. Do you have any tips for or a story for something that you were working on and how you found those paths, especially when in an async environment? Anything come to mind?
So at Automattic, everyone's super, super helpful and friendly. So we have when you first join Automattic, you have 2 weeks of support rotation. So you can understand what the product is like, what you're going to be working on, and learn about our customers, different pain points. And that is a lot of information that you don't know when you're starting out. Like you have to know about domains and DNS and all sorts of stuff. I had to rather, reach into the Slack channels and ask for help. I don't know what I'm doing. Could you please help me? Having the amount of information, the right amount of information to convey a certain problem, so that someone can answer you without having to ask a bunch of questions in response. So you can get more efficient responses. That's key with communication. And then with problem solving, there's a lot of just figuring it out. If there's a problem that comes up, we have different search tools. We can search the forums. We can search our field guide to see what other people have how they've handled a problem. But it's a lot of being self-initiated and figuring it out.
So it sounds like you're saying know what resources you can go to look for answers yourself, and then also know how to ask questions and give enough context and information that you're answering all the questions that someone might ask about this problem you're encountering. That's a skill, I think, definitely worth practicing. In any context, something you can always get better at.
Yeah. You don't want to give the person you're asking more work to do. You want to make it easy for them.
I always try to think of that myself. If I'm asking someone to do something or give me some information, I try to make their job as easy as possible. Link everything, put everything there so that they don't have to go, run around, because it will decrease the chance that they're going to answer you because it will just take them too long. So
yeah, exactly.
Make the job easy. Yeah. Okay. So another short answer from you. What is your number one non-obvious job seeker tip, specifically for remote designers?
Writing skills are just as important as design skills, because a lot of designing remotely is telling the story and explaining your ideas. And you have to write again to a bunch of different audiences, and so being able to concisely explain what you're trying to do and convince people that that's the right idea. That's key.
Is there anything that you've done or read that was helpful for you as a writer? It could be like a resource or sort of
great question.
Anything in that realm.
Yes. Oh, I wish I had it pulled up now. It might have been something from Steph Smith, actually.
Oh, wow. Coincidence.
Where is it? I apologize for not having this.
That's okay. It was a question I just thought of right now. So.
Yeah. Oh, no, I can't find it. Yeah, it was that writing is designing.
Oh, okay.
That's the name of it.
Find a link to that wherever it is and share that with everyone. Writing is design. I'm making a note. So this is what was it about that piece that resonated with you?
Oh, yes. Writing is thinking, learning to write with confidence. And it was, something that I found when I write out a question, just writing out the question gets me thinking. So as I'm thinking or as I'm typing, I'm working through that problem. And questions are coming up as I'm writing. And so the more I write about it, the better formed or the more concrete I feel about that particular thing I'm writing about.
Yeah, so it's like writing, the process of writing actually helps to clarify your thoughts.
Exactly, yes.
Uncover new questions you might have not thought of, yeah. I think sometimes we can feel that a question or something is obvious, but when you write it down, I really do think, I agree with you, it's something that really clarifies it in your own thoughts. Great. Okay, so we're gonna move on from the short answer questions. So you can do longer answers, whatever you'd like. I want to talk about networking. Okay, we have networking at this event for anyone who wants to check that out. Speed networking. But network is something that you build over time as a professional in your career. Everyone knows, you've heard it's important, but how do you approach making new connections remotely, and sort of what is the role that your network played in your life in terms of your career?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had the majority of my successful jobs have come through my network and referrals. Before I apply to a job, I like to reach out and find connections who've worked there in the past and who can give me more information on what it's like actually within the company. After I've applied to a job, I tend to look for people that I have worked with in the past, like having actual work experience with that person is important, to see if I can get them to give me a referral, to just get to the top of the pile. I expect, my own work to speak for itself, but, relying on leaning on your network to help boost your application it's a smart thing to do. It's a way to set yourself apart.
Yeah. Is there anything different that you've done? So you've been working remotely for 1.5 years with Automattic. Is there anything you're doing now to kind of continue building your network? Do you do online, events? I mean, obviously you're here with us, but is there anything that you do in the remote context to continue building your network?
Yeah, online events. I'm really enjoying these online conferences. There's like online workshops. Lara Hogan did a whole bunch. And also on Twitter, just participating on Twitter with random folks, random design folks. And there's also private Slack groups, like Rosenfeld Media, there's design systems, Slack groups. Relying on those to continue networking is what I've been doing. But it is harder, admittedly, when you're in a remote environment, especially now, given the state of the pandemic and such.
It's not impossible. It's just you have to be very intentional.
Exactly.
Very intentional. You have to decide, okay, I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to tweet this response to someone. Yeah. Okay. So when we're looking at how people should prepare to apply for a job, generally, what comes to mind? So like what should be on the checklist, if there is one? Maybe research to do in advance or questions to plan, things like what comes to mind for preparation? Yeah.
For me, it's important to understand what you want and what you're looking for in both a company and a remote company. Some of the questions that come to mind are, what about team rituals, like meetups? What does the company do for like collaboration practices, onboarding into remote work? Meetups, for example, what are the practices there? Let's see. Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about, what the job seeker themselves wants. Was there ever a situation in your career where maybe you thought you wanted something, but you didn't really realize maybe it wasn't the best match between what you wanted and what the company could offer? It could be the culture, it could be the job itself. Anything come to mind? I mean, you've had a long career. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, actually, when I worked at Apple, that was when I realized that engineering is good, but I miss design, because it was very much what is the square peg in a round hole. Like my skill set was different than what my skill set was different, and it fit more than just like a JavaScript engineer role. So yeah, knowing what you want and what makes you happy, and understanding that damn it, I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
ADD. I apologize, everybody.
And I think you're always learning and growing, right? So like maybe what you wanted when you joined Apple was you thought you wanted A, but then you actually through the process you realized, you know what, I want B. So I think being forgiving to yourself and saying, it's okay, I wanted that then, but now I want this and I'm learning.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind is like at Automattic, you can very much you can set what you want to do, or like what your process is, how we have autonomy. So how you get the job done is really up to you. We don't really have strict processes. And coming from places where that exists, that's an adjustment to make. And for some people, it doesn't really work, but recognizing the difference in like how, like having these firm processes and having a more organic thing and being able to adapt to that is a good good thing to be aware of. Yeah.
So we're going to get to the Q&A in just a minute or two. Is there any final thought that you want to share with job seekers about, journey, whether it's motivation, advice, or any, just last thing that maybe I didn't cover that you'd like to share?
Find a company that you want to work for and just try and get that job. I like when I'm starting out to look for a job, figuring out what it is that I want to do, just, generally, with Automattic, I wanted to do good in the world. I wanted to work somewhere where I would having an impact, people making their lives better. And that's what I was looking for in a company. And then Automattic popped up and met that need. So it made it more fulfilling.
Interesting. So instead of, you're suggesting, instead of just applying to 50 companies, which if you're looking for a remote job, that could be one way of going about it. It's really figure out who you want to go for. Maybe it could be top few and really focus.
Yeah, figure out what it is you need to do to reach those companies.
It makes a lot of sense too, because you are personalizing your CV, you're writing those cover letters, you're trying to show them why you're the right fit. So focusing may make more sense to really make yourself stand out as well. Yeah. So you're serious. Yeah, that's a great advice. Okay, so we're going to be answering a few of the Q&A. If you have additional questions, encourage all the audience members to use the stage chat and let us know. So we've got a question from Hazel, doctor. She says, whoa, it's so awesome to see someone with hybrid skills. She is a developer designer for emails and marketing tech and didn't know this thing was this thing existed in the design space. So I think that was more of a comment, but I wanted to one because I think that was really sweet. I think you are an inspiration to a lot of people who maybe didn't have a traditional career path or didn't follow the things that as other designers have. So just wanted to read that comment out loud.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so I'm interested in your collaboration. So another Alicia Alexander saying, I'm interested in your collaboration with developers and how Automattic defines who does what in JavaScript. For example, coding animation carousels versus function loops through API. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so at Automattic, traditionally, that has all been handled by engineering. Previously, for example, at Uber, we worked in React. So myself included as a creative technologist was able to build those React components. So that is something that I would love for Automattic to shift into, where designers are working in the component layer and the UI layer. But for the time right now, it's design generally takes care of the pixel bits, and then that goes to engineering. And once development starts, implementation starts, it's more of a collaborative hand-in-hand process through to shipping.
Great, thank you. So Alicia is looking more to dive into the design side. So I think that question hopefully is a little bit helpful in that direction. So Pi has a question of how Automattic design team works together across time zones. So we touched on that just a little bit, being mostly an asynchronous kind of team. Does everyone have like a time where who's working at what time? How often do you have meetings? Just walk us through what it's like to work together.
Oh, it's easy when you're all in the same time zone, for sure. Yes. On my team, I have someone who's in Spain, and so our collaboration happens at, I'm sorry, my child is in the room pressing our Nest alarm.
No problem.
No.
Real work and life kind of.
Yeah.
You're lucky my dog's not barking. That happens from time to time.
So yeah, she tends to work late at night at like 9 or 10 at night. That's when our overlap is. So like 1 o'clock Pacific time is good for her. It's really on a per team basis. On the wider.com design team, we have people in Australia, in Spain, in London, and then all across the US. So trying to find a time that works for everybody it's not really possible most of the time. So you just kind of have to figure it out. What's worked for one of the designers on my team is, she gets through her day, she posts something for feedback, and then while she's sleeping, we're all doing our regular day, so we can give her feedback, and then when she comes on, she's got all of that feedback ready to go for the next day, so it's kind of working out there. But again, it's like experimental to see, having patience and low expectations. I shouldn't say low expectations, but, reasonable expectations, waiting about 24 hours. What you need to do.
And it sounds like you're relying on those writing skills that you say are so important.
Yes.
Communication skills to be able to give feedback in a very useful way that they can move forward with that feedback you've given.
Yes, like not nitpicks, but like actual, like asking questions and like, okay, I like where you're going. Now here are some questions to think about in the next iteration.
Exactly. So that's something that if you work across time zones, you may not be used to at first, but it's something you need to get better at.
Yes.
Back and asking questions.
Yeah, it's a thing to just adapt for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and having meetups also really helps, because when you're at the meetup, you're with a design team for about a week, and you can get through a lot of work. You can understand people, really bond, and that makes working across time zones and working asynchronously more easily.
So are these meetups that you would have had like pre-COVID, where you'd get together in one location for like, basically, it sounds like sort of a retreat, but was it just for the design team, or?
There's a whole bunch of different ones. There's the GM, and that is about 10 days long, and that's the entire company. My design team, the .com design team, we were just in Amsterdam in February, March, for a week. And then previously, we've had the whole design team in Arizona for a week. So it really varies.
Very cool. Okay, we have a question about remote work reporting. Is there any kind of reporting that you have to do, or is it, so you've described kind of giving feedback, but like say to your manager or to your supervisors, how does reporting look like?
Again, that varies across different teams. So for my particular team, we have a Monday post where we reflect on the past week and we share what we're going to do for this next coming week. And then up a level, there's a, hey, why don't you tell us everything that you've done this week visually? And then there's Thursday updates, which are more company-wide, bigger ones. Yeah.
That's good. I think a cadence of like Monday we do this type of reporting. It's not like you send one report at the end of the week. You have different ways to show what you're working on.
Exactly. Yeah. And some folks will, I know there's an idea of like a design journal, a daily design journal, where each day you can post the loom with what you did. But again, it varies based on what you need. We've had geek bots with, we had every day at 3:00, there'd be a prompt for daily share. We've also tried morning reports. But again, it varies.
It's good to know there's like different things different teams try, and you're always trying new things to see what works.
Yeah, we are big on experimenting.
Yeah,
and iterating.
Pavneet, he's asking how Automattic implements responsive design. If you have any frameworks, tech stacks, techniques. I don't know if that's something you can answer succinctly.
The normal ways. So built into our code base are breakpoints. Outside of that, just in Figma, we have different. Sorry, again, my son is right here. Different screen sizes to match each, but there's no specific special way of doing responsive design.
Okay. BiPi has another question about how important a work project is versus a side project in your portfolio.
Oh, great question. Where does the most passion lie?
It definitely comes out. It's obvious, but in your portfolio.
Yeah, if you're really proud of your side project and it's not tied to a company that you're working actively at, that doesn't matter. As long as you're showing, depth of thought and problem solving. That's what I'm looking for.
Wherever the passion is, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a great tip. So Greg is asking, what is the makeup of the team? And so, I mean, I'm not sure exactly. Potentially, it could be geographic regions or like, I don't know. Maybe you can just describe what your team looks like.
Sure. So my team is the managed design team. We have two product designers. One is in New York, one is in Spain. One leans more into UX, while the other leans more into visual design, and they complement each other. And then we also have a front-end developer who happily builds out the things that we design. The team's flexed to 5 in the past. Thinking about other ways to describe this. Our wider team,
How big is Automattic as an organization?
We are over 1,000 now. Just before September, I think we were, last year in September, we were right below 1,000, and then we acquired Tumblr, which made us grow a whole bunch.
It's so impressive as a remote organization to be able to, manage people. It's a really impressive endeavor. I'm just curious, do you have a head of remote? Or is that something, some organizations do? No? You've never had one. That's so it's like the hot job this year, as companies are trying to transition. But I guess because...
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. It is it's a big adjustment.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things.
You were always remote? Is that the case? Or Automattic?
Automattic, yeah, always
remote, right? So maybe if you start that way, you don't need a head of remote because it's the thing. It's the default.
It's the norm, yeah. But for new designers, it's an adjustment to go into a remote lifestyle, especially at Automattic, since we work so transparently and having like all of your early work, your early thinking out there for anyone to comment on that. You're showing a lot of vulnerability and. Getting comfortable with that. It takes some
interesting. Being comfortable with vulnerability, whether it's your writing, your early design.
Yeah,
that's kind of like being naked in front of the whole world.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, personally, that was the hardest thing to adapt to, but also the biggest area of growth.
Absolutely. If you can see it as an area of growth, then I think that's where it turns into a positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Britik has a question about ADD. She says, as someone that also has ADD, I'm curious to know if you have a routine or a morning or evening ritual that helps you stay focused and productive.
Great question. I used to, but with the pandemic, it's a bit difficult to stick to a specific schedule because of the children jumping in all of the time. But before that, I really liked having like 9 until noon as my focus time or my input hours where I'd have more meetings. And then I would take some break, a 2-hour break in the afternoon, eat lunch, play video games, and then get back into my output time where I'd actually design or writing. Sometimes the output time can come in the afternoon or at nighttime. Like I find my focus time to be like 10 o'clock until 2 a.m., which is really great when it's quiet.
So I think it sounds like find something that works for you. Like if you're able to in the remote space, that is one of the benefits for, flexibility.
Yeah, frequent breaks, just being able to reset my mind and then come back to something. Like it's hard to trigger hyperfocus lately. But if you know how to do that for yourself, then optimize your circumstances.
Yeah. I heard this is maybe not applicable now if you can't go to cafes. I've heard of a technique called the popcorn technique that helps some people as well, where you go to one area for 2 hours and then you keep changing like a piece of popcorn, I guess. And that's something that I've tried if I can't focus. And I think that's just something I've heard that works. So it's like changing the physical space you're in, even if it's from your living room to your dining room to your, don't go to your bedroom, but the other spaces in the house, you can try that just to change the scenery and try to focus.
Yeah, body doubling as well. Like if you can work with another person, even if it's just on Zoom, that can be really helpful.
Body doubling, I haven't heard that term before. So it just means you have someone that's working with you.
Having someone just beside you working can make it easier for you to focus. And this is something that I had done without realizing why I was doing it. And then I had read something and like, oh yeah, this is one of those signs of ADD, or this is a technique you can use. Oh, well, that's why I'm always asking like my partner to come and work a lot with me so that I can get this thing done.
That's a great tip. Okay, body doubling. Just have someone work with you because then you'll be, I don't know. It's like tricks your body into like mimicking, the other person. Interesting. Okay, so let's see. I have a few more questions. These are great questions. Thank you all for asking them. What does remote onboarding entail? So you talked a little bit at the beginning about the kind of test project that you had, but like, what does it look like once you were actually onboarded, and how do you kind of ramp up? How long does that take? Like, do you remember a year and a half ago what that was like?
Well, I've onboarded 2 new people in the past 6 months, so that's a better point of reference. And as always, it varies depending on the person. My preferred method is to, so we have like an onboarding doc that goes through our team rituals. And that's at like my little team level, our bigger.com level. And then there's also at the Automattic, like the Automattic Cree, the way that we work. But it's going through, these are the expectations as a designer. This is how often we expect you to post to P2. This is where you post, what kinds of posts you make and when. What else is there? Our different tools. There's also one of the rituals that we like to do for new teammates is how we roll exercise. So we understand how that person works best and how they'll fit into the team with our working personalities. And then for those who might struggle with, like focusing or like setting up, like for some, it's difficult to just start working productively right away. And so you have to give tips, like setting your own environment or setting your office, your working space to be that, leaving your computer there and going elsewhere. But stuff like that. It really depends on the person and tuning it to their specific needs, whether they've had the experience working remotely or not. And also what their expectations are too.
Expectations. I'm curious how often you use, like, let's say in the onboarding process, do you use a lot of video? Were there a lot of meetings? I've heard some companies that like schedule lots of like video calls because they're trying to recreate something that you would have in an in-office onboarding, or was it all like sort of documented, text-based?
It's both of those things. So there is a text-based part, and then there's also written documentation so that folks can read it along, whenever they want to, and then come with questions. So at the beginning, there's usually like a meet and greet at the very beginning, and then we have our one-on-one, and our one-on-ones are usually scheduled. Like what we talk about is, okay, well, how's the first week been? Do you have any questions? There are different questions we can ask, based on where they are in the onboarding journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're gonna have one final question, and it's kind of something we've touched on along the entire conversation, but I think it's a good final question just to say, how does your experience compare as, say, working in a team when you're comparing how you used to work physically in an office versus remotely? Like, we can just end on that note because I think that covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of things that are different, right? But kind of, what's your experience as a team with the in office versus remote?
Yeah, it's harder. It's harder to get to a place where we're all speaking the same language. It takes a lot of work. Sorry, my child is here trying to get something. Sorry.
Seeing the mom glare.
He's trying to pull a plug out of my monitor. Okay, sorry. Could you re-ask the question?
Yes. What is your experience on the biggest difference from remote team to physical in-office team?
Yeah, okay. It's the relationships and the ease at which they form in an office versus remotely, because you just have far more opportunities to like hang out and get to know the people that you're working with. You're all in the same room, so it's easy to have those conversations and to understand, like, oh, when you're saying that, you're saying it with this way and you mean this thing. But you don't have that context when you're working remotely. So you have to work for it.
Okay, I think the last and probably the most important question is, what's your favorite Nintendo Switch game?
Oh, it's Baba Is You, for sure. Baba Is You.
Great note to end on, especially so if you missed any part of the conversation, Lynn was saying, I think you said during like your lunch break, you like to kind of play a bunch of video games as sort of a mental break between your work block A.
Yeah. The logical puzzle game of Baba Is You is a really great break for that.
Awesome. Well, Lynn, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. We've learned so much from you. You've shared some really great resources. We've put a few of the links in the chat. We'll also put them in the Facebook community. It's really been exciting to hear how your journey has not been the typical designer journey and sort of, but how that, your experimentation and your curiosity has kind of come together and led you to such a successful remote career. So really appreciate that. And
thanks for having me.
We actually enjoyed seeing your child pop up in there. That's like a real kind of remote work life thing. All right, everyone, take care.